Jackson, as I previewed you a little bit this morning, Jackson, when we started the meeting, just because I was moved by the ways in which you took seriously this task today. I suspect one of the reasons it was actually Jennifer, because she knew I was trying to think about somebody to speak today, and she said, well, why don't you ask Jackson? You've been really interested in who he is and what he's doing, because she knew I'd gone to lunch with him and talked to him a little bit about his family and his journey from MBA. I just asked him a minute ago, I said, you played football, right? He said, well, I watched more than played. And he was in the jazz band and was a good artist. He went to Rice University after MBA, where he did well, and then went into banking. And he'll tell you the rest of the story, and I think I'll give you a glimpse of why I thought he'd do a great job today. So please join me in welcoming Jackson Balthrop.
Hey guys, good morning, afternoon. No coffee, it's pretty bold. I guess you really are early in the year. So good afternoon. Thank you to Mr. Joya and to each of you for giving me a few minutes to speak today. It's really special to be here. I'm pretty terrible with names, horrible even. So I'll throw out there again that I'm Jackson Balthrop. As for detailed synopsis, I'm a 2003 graduate. I went on from here to Rice University down in Texas, after which, as Mr. Joya said, I made what already feels like a couple decades worth of forays into finance and software. No doubt the most calculable uses of a biology degree. Along the way, I wound up playing a very small part building a pretty successful tech company. Recently, my family and I returned home. So, give or take 12 years in the wilderness, 6 here on the hill, a taste of the wide world beyond, and I'm back in assembly again. Mr. Pruitt used to remind me constantly that I had just a little knowledge, sometimes an extremely small bit of knowledge, which is most certainly a dangerous thing. Alciadit. It's as true now as it was then. I've had the tremendous privilege of getting to know many of you, whether as a fellow student, a pupil, a parent of sorts to my nephew here, or a lugubrious alumnus that has identified the best free gym in town. Well, sort of free. By no means the exception nor the rule, my path here and back has been untraditional. Raised in Ashland City, I did not attend a feeder school, nor have I ever spent a lot of time on the boulevard. I was one of 4, but the only one who got to go here. Recently, I've gotten to be a big part of my nephew's life, a nephew who I'm really proud as a student here. In few endeavors have I been so often reminded that I know so little. Life's thrown much at me I did not expect. I've gotten to see and do things I couldn't have imagined, all around the world, because MBA opened doors. And I've had some heartbreaks that MBA has helped me weather. So that's my lens. It's a lens through which I've borne witness to my 20-plus year relationship with MBA, and it's the lens through which I now see the approximately 125 folks here responsible for making the living, breathing MBA what it is. Mostly MBA veterans, a handful of rookies, 20 years average teaching experience, 30 of you with over 15 years here, a handful with over 40, going on 50. Median age now, kind of early 40s. I'm getting a little closer to you. Degrees of all sorts, many PhDs, a couple JDs. 80% of our faculty hold advanced degrees. You're Nashville's most elite team, and many of you are not even from Nashville. And there you sit, having returned from what were supposed to be a few restful weeks for what must be the Monday of all Mondays. Now 7 long hours into cobweb-shaking OTAs for season number 152. All of you are coaches. A great many of you are athletic coaches, most of very successful teams. So you already know this well. You represent a storied franchise, but your record is empty today. For all the tradition of MBA teams, for all the gilded halls, for all the inspirational quotes adorning our walls, the trophies and merit scholars, today is a blank slate. Even Nick Saban and Derek Mason begin the season in the same place. Kinda. So what are you doing here? 95% of you have done this before. Some of you have made more returns than I have years in my life. No doubt pondering retirement enough times to make Brett Favre blush. Yet you're still here. Why? This question comes in many forms. It's one of my favorite interview questions for every candidate for one of my teams. Basically, what is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? Why are you here? Why are y'all here? Typically, when interviewing, I'm hoping to learn more about how someone thinks, how they solve problems, and how they compete. Do they love to learn? Will they rise to conquer new challenges? One of my mentors distilled all of it to this. Is the guy's dream to play in the NFL, or does he want to win the Super Bowl? Competence may be rare, but it's still table stakes. You need all-purpose athletes. Down in the gym, there's a line of Emerson's that reminds us, nothing great has ever been achieved without enthusiasm. I'm not so naive as to believe that everyone should follow their passion, but we do need to be passionate. And for that, we need an answer to why. It's well tried that we have a lot of purpose here, and we aren't bashful about talking about it. It's not keeping 50s haircuts in style, or sustaining the local khaki and blue blazer emporium, nor making parents' Saturday mornings rough enough that, well, stuff just rolls on downhill. You set out to prepare young men for contributions, to instill in them beliefs like character and hard work trump last name and zip code. I'm really proud that we know who we are. Gentleman, scholar, athlete is a clear credo, even for imperfect people like us. It says I know how to say words like Renaissance, I'm not a bad pick for kickball, trivia night, or a last-minute date for Thanksgiving. Back then, I was the kid Mr. Moxley designated permanent Huck Finn orator. So I may still not be the best guy to say Renaissance, but you get the idea. This mission is something really big. It has won us many seasons. I expect it will win us many more, yet it is merely essential, not sufficient. Outside, it's a radically changing, technology-driven world, rife with uncertainty and disruption. So how can a place that thrives on, is in fact built on, 152 years of tradition and continuity sustain itself? What is it that will keep my Latin medal from being mocked as a patrician anachronism by some guys down Harding Road? In tech, it's often said that if you aren't growing, and growing rapidly, you're already dead. You're a beeper, a fax machine, or a piece of paper. That requires constant evolution. You've got to get up and get better or become obsolete. I'm pretty sure change has been a named constant since Mr. Lanier and Euclid first got together and perfected the raw power of the triangle. Now it just feels faster. You're preparing young men for a world in which industries are routinely upturned. The largest hotel company in the world doesn't even own any hotels. It's a world in which McKinsey thinks somewhere between 50 and 70% of all existing jobs could largely be automated by 2030, increasingly reaching white-collar jobs, maybe even teachers. That would mean a lot of degrees for jobs that may not exist, that have landed most folks tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. A skill shift is on. It shouldn't have surprised me, but a big percentage of my classmates aren't doctors, they aren't lawyers, they're not academics. We really did go off to do all sorts of things. Nearly a third of us wound up in tech, where 5 companies that barely existed in the 90s represent over $3.5 trillion of market cap. Ben Franklin could have easily thought in threes: death, taxes, and change. I understand a theme of this year is innovation. This is what it's all about. Are we doing enough? It's a near universal ask. I can't remember ever hearing a good answer to that question. You can't say yes, you can't say no. Generally, folks think of innovation as technology, the newest gadget, gizmo, or the alluring soft glow of a retina display. Else, the temptation is to define it as a proxy for wholesale transformation, eagerly casting off the yoke of experience and beginning all anew. Of course, digitizing everything in sight. Yes, MBA requires innovation in these most tangible forms, constantly evolving to remain at its best. And we've made some huge strides. Much has been accomplished in the past 20 years. Awesome infrastructure, incredible programs like the Wilson Grants, national recognition spanning art, debate, scholarship, and athletics. And we've got a website, we do some email, we've got smartphones. Yet, what is most remarkable about this place is what hasn't changed, which fundamentally is how you go about preparing young men for change. To me, innovation is more an intangible. It's about the set of core capabilities we use to solve old, new, and unthinkable problems. Innovation should mean cultivating successful innovators, people who are able and motivated to learn, think critically, adapt, and inject a layer of human creativity and personalized experience into life's algorithms. There are easily 80-11 of your lessons that still rattle around in my head. It's those I most remember, not the quotes on the walls. There were whispers of encouragement, brutal shouts of criticism, the frequent stinging mockery of sarcasm, great laughs, and tyrannical wall sits that just wouldn't end. You mold us. This year's beginning called to mind a few of my first encounters with MBA, moments when the wonder and impressionability of a beginner's mind collided with you. With a little distance, reflection, a lot of counseling, there are a few that can be properly romanticized. My first ever encounter with MBA was the ICE exam, which I took over in the old wing of the Massey building. For a January test, it proved aptly named. I was an Ashland City kid, and like most Ashland City kids, I lived on a big hill, what used to be rural Route 6. So the day before, my father had parked his pickup down by the sawmill, next to a bigger road that was more likely to be salted, just in case. This was back before Snow Day had entered Mr. Joya's or Mr. Norton's lexicon. So as you can imagine, Snowbird offered no quarter. We arose in the dark and waddled the 15, 25 miles down the hill to the parked truck with me crashing through the snow, wrapped like Ralphie from A Christmas Story. Okay? Kind of like this. Those of you with little kids know. We loaded ourselves into the truck, bracing for an adventure to the big city. Our truck then was a real utility truck and had already seen a lot of wear. Remarkably, it has survived even more over the last 20+ years. It's the kind of truck you need 5 different sticky notes to remind you what workaround is needed for each mechanical function. The most memorable feature that morning was the lack of heat. Really, more than just the lack of heat. It was the perforated cabin, which naturally provided a primitive form of air conditioning in summers. But in the winter, such a feature is not really a selling point. It was a long, brutally cold ride. Eventually, after slowly plodding along, entirely alone on the road, for what could have been years, we arrived at the drop-off circle. My father and I exchanged a look as I scooted from the truck. I'm not sure where he planned to wait out the test with his newspaper. What in the heck had Mom gotten us into? I navigated my way through what even then was an intimidating campus to the proper classroom, where, confronted by suspicious onlookers, I heaped layer upon layer into a pile. Weathered coat, stocking cap, gloves, an old snowsuit that had last seen action in the Ardennes, boots, sweaters, and so on, finally landing in a seat, just in time. Without any of the crowd's bemusement, and confirming only that I did, in fact, have 2 number 2 pencils, Mrs. Steele, I believe, set the room to work. Nothing else mattered, just my work. Work, and as it turned out, a lot of catching up to do, a few doses of culture shock, but I was here. That was the first of many long rides into town, of arriving early before help sessions and departing late, well after practice, well after security had locked the doors. It was the first of many huge sacrifices my parents would make for me to be here, especially my mother. But I would learn that's just what you do for opportunity. Without a doubt, the opportunity to attend MBA is the greatest gift I've ever been given. When the day had finally come to sign the register, I was again experiencing MBA anew, for real this time. I was an unmistakable initiate, khakis, polo, hiking boots, and doubled over by a backpack with a load for daily ascent that would be the envy of Sisyphus himself. I now thought I knew what I was getting into. We were out of our comfort zones. There'd be hard work, discipline, and eventually something mysterious called a theme. These are just the building blocks. Fanatical discipline and hard work are indispensable inputs for creating anything worthwhile, especially to creating oneself. But they don't help you know what to build. For that, there are uncompromising standards. Here, there is an explicit expectation of excellence in all things. This defines MBA for me. One of my first teachers and coaches had a succinct mantra. After all, this is MBA. We must have heard it a million times, ever calling us to form. From the seemingly trivial, your shirt is untucked. After all, this is MBA. To behavior, granted the often humorously broad categorization of conduct unbecoming. Straighten up, gentlemen. After all, this is MBA. To big stuff, to the objective standard that only what is excellent is excellent. Excellence isn't defined down because you worked hard or because someone else didn't. Aim high. After all, this is MBA. I heard it so many times that first year that it was something we even joked about at home. Not into what you're having for dinner? The yard looking a little shabby? After all, this is MBA. I'll never forget it. Mr. Jones often prodded us to consider the great men theory of history with some Shakespeare. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. Few among us will achieve such greatness in this sense, but everyone at MBA is called to be. That makes us extremely fortunate. Excellence is super. It's a clear and worthy standard rightfully ingrained in every aspect of MBA and dutifully expected of each student. Yet, not every push toward it is effective. You know that well. MBA has a recipe. It's not an assembly line. One of you recently shared with me that every boy here is a project. That's a huge deal. And it's a side of MBA that has been really inspiring and really humbling to see this go around. Well, I'm sure I was loosely aware of it as a student. There's no way I could have appreciated it as fully as now. I've been so impressed by you. Each boy has his own team. Teachers, coaches, advisor, deans, counselors, adjunct mentors, patrons, administrators, and more. All with an awareness of and action plan for his individualized needs. It's an extraordinary investment you make, and quite the ballet. You build incredible personal bonds, just with your presence and interest. It's an invitation to join a team, a shared interest, being attuned to a down day, granting a little slack that's undue on demerits, a word of encouragement, a pat on the back, even the occasional, very macho hug. Well beyond the classrooms and fields, I've also heard you tell of rallying around boys battling cancer, boys who've lost a parent or who have parents that are lost, boys struggling with what it means to fit in here, and boys making poor decisions. And I've gotten to see it be much more than words. I've personally experienced lighter sides too. The teacher that humored my interest in bringing in animals for dissection, the coach that shared his practice field for extra workouts, mocking me only sparingly, and the coach who would chide mischief with what must have been a loving, "What in the hell were you thinking, son?" When asked what they love most about MBA, many of the boys will wax poetic about camaraderie, lifelong brotherhood, and the sense of fellowship that perhaps comes from just having endured the likes of you. as much as anything else, community is the MBA difference families are looking for when they enroll their sons here. You are the backbone. I'm proud to be on such a team with you. As you make ready for the onslaught of the week ahead, I hope you'll all put an eye toward innovation and innovators. And power up your own beginners' minds. Recall a time before that's the way we've always done it meant anything to you. Sure, stay current on your field's reading list and explore how technology is transforming it. But also learn to use Snap. Download a new app per week. Watch a YouTube video your student thought was funny that isn't. Maybe even use Google to fact check them for a change. Most of all, I hope you'll wear proudly that you're here for a cause bigger than a job. Another state championship trophy, even bigger than 152 years of tradition. This investment of your time, your energies, your enthusiasm, your lives into each day of this one season makes a difference that is unforgettable. I'm incredibly grateful, and I'm keen to see where we go from here. Thank you.